It is so good to see you again. It's been a while, and I understand the Lord's blessed you by having moved from the Sioux to London. Is that where you are now? Kitchener.
Yeah.
And no, it's good to see you and your wife and to be up with family again this day. And the Lord bless you as you bring a message to us, and may we be blessed through you. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. All right. Good to see everyone. Thank you for having me. And as Bernie said, the last year or so has been a whirlwind for me. This is my wife up here singing with me is Becky, and just really thankful for her in my life just in the last year or so. And moved to Kitchener, started a new life down there. But just God did some amazing things in a short time, and I actually ended up finding work down there in a very short order. Just amazing, because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to find a job in my field in chaplaincy in a correctional, but I did end up getting a job at a Vanier Center for Women in Milton, and that was an amazing door just opened right after we moved. There was a job posting, and God just opened a door for me to get that. So I'm really thankful for God bringing me down south. But I will say I do miss the north, and for you who are from here, I've got some Northern Ontario metaphors, which I think you'll appreciate here this morning. So I think, let me just start off by just giving us a few pictures, and I'm sure I'm giving you some examples that are personal in my life, and I hope can relate with you as well. And then we'll go into the scriptures and look at what the scriptures say. I don't know what your experience is, but one of my struggles is becoming enslaved to the so-called to-do list. You get up in the morning, you start looking at what's got to be done. And sometimes you can get overwhelmed, and you can become frustrated with, as Becky and I adjust to a new life, we're trying to get all these things done, and we're trying to work through, and first thing in the morning, we get up in the morning, we got to make the lunches, and the day goes. And for you who have kids, I know that's a huge challenge as a parent. When you have young children, especially, you're trying to get things done off the to-do list, and that to-do list can become a burden. You can become enslaved to it. In fact, the scriptures even say this, Psalm 39:6, "We are merely moving shadows, and all our busy rushing ends in nothing." Solomon in Ecclesiastes talks about this futility of trying to complete this endless to-do list. He says, you end up heaping up all this wealth, he says, and working hard all your life, and then it goes to someone else, or maybe someone you don't want to go to. Solomon said he did all these amazing things. He had built storehouses and beautiful homes and gardens, and he goes in Ecclesiastes 1 about all these amazing things he accomplished. But yet he says at the end of this amazing to-do list that he did accomplish, he says, what? Meaningless. All is vanity. Now that might be kind of demotivating for you today, and I'm not trying to be a downer, but I think that we need to look at the scriptures and we need to say, okay, how can I view my daily to-do list, or my life to-do list, if you will, and not become enslaved to that to-do list? I came across a T-shirt, which I want to put up on the slide here. What if the hokey pokey really is what it's all about? Now, we laugh when we see that shirt, but yet I think the guy who asked that question, who did up that T-shirt, behind that question, there's something a lot more serious. There's a deeper question saying, what is the point? What is the point of all this rushing around? Where is meaning? What is the meaning in life? Is there meaning? In fact, I will go further to say that I really believe, church, that we are facing a time of a whole new wave of meaninglessness. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but My brother and I were talking about something called nihilism. Basically, it means nothing. Nothing means anything. That was one of the things that Friedrich Nietzsche would talk about, the man who said God is dead. But basically this idea that there is no meaning. There is no, and people have taken that philosophy and are taking it to a new degree. And we don't need to go into examples of that, but I'm sure if you don't have to look very far in the headlines, where people are saying nothing means anything, so why don't we just create our own meaning? Whatever feels good, do it. If it floats your boat, who cares? You got to create your own meaning, but I think that's a very slippery slope, and the scriptures warn us seriously against that thinking. I'll give you an example in my life. I'm a big picture guy. I need to know why I'm doing what I'm doing, or I stop. I need to have a deeper motivation behind what I'm doing. Me and my buddy Scotty and the Sioux, we were working out at Fit for Less. Nathan is very devoted, but Nathan put us to shame because me and Scotty started with around the same time Nathan did, but we quit because we couldn't remember why we're doing what we're doing. We're getting up at 7 a.m, pulling weights. We're like, oh man, this is really hard. And eventually we're like, you know what? We're not seeing the results we want. So we quit. I'm just being honest. We just didn't have the follow through. But the bottom line is, unless we can remember why we're doing what we're doing, we stop. And so I want to look at a theological statement put together. It's called the Westminster Catechism. Some of you may have heard of it, but a bunch of very well-respected theologians and scholars of the Bible came together, and they put together a document. I believe this was a long time ago. I don't actually have a date on it, but we're talking, not probably around 1500 or so. And he's saying, they asked a very pointed question. They said, what is the chief end of man? What is the chief end? Ultimately, what is his ultimate aim according to the scriptures? This is how they answered. To glorify God and enjoy him forever. To glorify God and enjoy him forever. Another argument, which is often used for the existence of God, but I'm going to use it in a different way. This argument or metaphor is called the teleological argument. Now this argument has a really neat metaphor, if you can track with me here. So let's pretend you're walking on a beach for many, many, many kilometers. Pretend you're on Four Sands or something, and you're just walking and walking and walking on a beautiful beach like that. But you see, and then all of a sudden, you stumble onto seeing something glinting in the sand. You pick it up. It's a watch. And you start examining it, and you see that every hour, and it very precisely measures the hours, and you open it up, and you examine it further, and if it's a Swiss watch, you see it has cogs and springs, and you see that it's been designed. But now, let me back up. Would you say, if you'd seen that watch, wow, what a coincidence. The sand grains just fell together in the perfect formation and formed this amazing little piece of technology, or this little amazing piece of engineering? No, of course not. You would assume that someone had left it there. You would assume that it had been designed for a purpose. And I think I want us to take that metaphor and then look at ourselves. I want us to look at ourselves and ask, what is it that we were created for? Each one of you has an amazing amount of design in you. The psalmist in 139 says, Lord, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Each of us has amazing design and precision in us. What is it that we were created for? I want to give you one more picture, a Northern Ontario picture, which I think, before I go into looking at our own design, and then I think this will give us a picture as we kind of look at this question: what were we created for? In Northern Ontario here, we have many beautiful trees. Beautiful trees. And in fact, there was a tree right nearby here, which for the longest time was the tallest tree in Ontario. It was in the Kirkwood Forest, north of Thessalon. I see John Stewart here. I don't know if you saw it, John, but you did see it. There was a giant white pine in the Kirkwood Forest. It was known as it's an eastern white pine, or the Pinus strobus. And for some, this white pine, I'm going to give you some history of this tree, because they do actually know how old it was, according to a science called dendrochronology. Many of you, I'm sure if any of you have been logging or even know of, you can actually count the years of a tree through the rings in the cross section. You can only do that obviously until after it's been cut down, which is, but I think maybe they have different ways of measuring it. But I know that one of the ways is through actually measuring the rings on what they call it, the cookie of the tree, or the cross section. So this particular tree, this is the best picture I could find online, but it's an incredible monster there. You get a bit of the scale, a bit of the idea of the scale from the boardwalk below, but I'm going to give you some numbers which might help you. So this tree was, according to the scientists, was started growing in 1642. 1642. So for some historical perspective, consider that in 1669, when the settlement of Sault Ste. Marie received its current name, and only a few people lived in the area, this giant white pine was already 27 years old. Sault Ste. Marie is one of the oldest settlements in Canada. So it was already there before Sault Ste. Marie gave its current name. Now these are a bunch of Sault Ste. Marie facts, which because actually the cookie of this tree is in the museum in Sault Ste. Marie, in the Bush Plain Museum. In 1895, when the Canadian locks opened on the St. Mary's River, this giant white pine was 253 years old. In 1963, when the International Bridge was constructed to the U.S., this tree was 321 years old. So, and then for many years, this giant white pine was a popular tourist attraction in that Thessalon area. The reason this tree still remains is it was the last remnant of a stand of large white pine that was likely harvested around 1910. The tree probably survived the extensive logging in the area, similar to Blind River, because it was growing at the bottom of a steep hillside, making it difficult to remove. And surprisingly, just recently in 1997, sadly, this giant white pine blew down in a windstorm. And the Ontario Forest Research Institute determined that the tree was 355 years old at the time it blew over. 355 years, that's incredible. It was 49 meters tall, which is as tall as a 15-story building. It was 1.4 meters in diameter at breast height, or just under 5 feet in diameter. It would be a huge tree. From below, you could not see a branch until 80 feet up. 80 feet up. In the 1800s, this would have been the cream of the crop, one of the prime specimens coveted by the British for ship masts, and then decimated by a century of logging. This tree contained enough wood to build a 3-bedroom house. So I love this tree, and unfortunately I didn't get to see it, thank you, Jim. That's the cross section right there from the Bush Plain Museum if you want to see it. And I think actually, me and my brother Mark are thinking about trying to hike out and find find it lying down at least. So maybe John, maybe you can help direct us. At least find it in its resting place. It's still there. But this is, I tell you all this, as you look at that pine doing what it was designed to do. Jim, if you could just go back to the previous. Think about, do you think that tree was really struggling or really having to work really hard to do what it was doing? I know that it was doing some amazing things. But do you really think that it was checking off a to-do list? Do you really think it was saying, okay, all right, got to get enough water today. Okay, have to, grow that branch. I mean, this tree was doing what it was designed to do. It was just being a tree, following, just doing what its DNA, doing what God had designed it to do. And look at what it can do, uninhibited. Just growing to a massive height and being just a beautiful specimen. And I know just such an incredible picture, I think, of God's creation. And as we look at ourselves, and look, what were we designed to do? That tree is doing what it was designed to do. But what are we designed to do as humans? Now, from what Scripture tells us, we were given several purposes to be the vanguard and steward of all living things in this new world. But we were created for something else, something that is wonderful and mysterious to contemplate. Being made in the very image of the one who fashioned us. We were given the capability to relate to this Creator in a very unique and beautiful way. Being given free will, and therefore being an autonomous moral agent, this opened up the possibility of reciprocated love and real relationship with our Creator. In essence, we were selected over all of creation to connect with God in a very unique, meaningful, and personal way. Do you remember what Genesis says about Adam? It sounds like something out of Greek mythology, but it's in our very own scriptures. It says, God walked with Adam in the cool of the day, and Adam walked with God. Wouldn't you love to have been a bird on a tree and eavesdrop on those early conversations? What would that have been like to listen and to talk with God as a man talks with a friend, to have that freedom? And yet there was no limiting of God wasn't debasing himself in any way. He was just in a beautiful relationship with man. But we all know that Adam and Eve, ultimately our father and mother, broke the covenant. And the wounds are very, very deep. They run deep in all of us as their children. They show up in all of creation. But I also believe the wounds are also with God. Hosea 6, verse 4-7 reads this: What can I do with you, Ephraim? What can I do with you, Judah? Your love is like the morning mist, like the early dew that disappears. Therefore, I cut you in pieces with my prophets. I killed you with the words of my mouth. Then my judgments go forth like the sun. For I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and acknowledgement of God, rather than burnt offerings. Listen to what God says next. As at Adam, they have broken the covenant. They were unfaithful to me there. as at Adam, they have broken the covenant. I believe there is some hurt on God's part. God is hurt by us turning from him and going our own way, by mistrusting his words to say, don't, I've set boundaries for you. I don't want you to eat of this tree. I want you to enjoy all of my blessings. I want to love you, but there are certain boundaries I have for you as your divine parent. And yet, we disobeyed. We broke the covenant. But then thousands of years later, the Son of God, the Son of Man, Emmanuel, God with us, shows up on earth. And he creates quite a stir. He claims to be the Son of God, God in the flesh. The Pharisees try to trap him by asking this question: Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. When I first heard Jesus say this, I don't know about you, but I was like, that's it? That doesn't sound like a to-do list. That actually sounds quite freeing. To just love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. That sounds not like something I have to do, but something I get to do. Something I'm free to do, to love God with all my heart and all my soul and all my mind. Isn't there a bigger to-do list? The whole law and the prophets are summed up in these two statements: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Is that really what it's all about? I love this quote by Phil Anderson. It says, the pathology of my religion erupted in insidious fashion. Believing and doing the right things became a substitute for living in right relationship with God. I spent most of my time learning what I couldn't do instead of enjoying and celebrating what I could do because of my relationship with Jesus. Now, God's been teaching me it's not about a to-do list. It's about relationship. In fact, a to-do list with God, doing my morning devotions, check. Going to church, check. Trying not to lose my temper or swear, check. That to-do list chokes off any semblance of a healthy, vibrant relationship. If I go to my wife and I bring her flowers on Valentine's Day, and I did, because it's Valentine's Day, there is an expectation. But if my wife said, honey, why did you do this? And I said, because it's my duty, darling, as your husband. How do you think she would receive that? It's my duty. I think that would be a real big buzzkill. We can't just, our relationship with God often can take on that type of feeling. God, Sunday morning, all right, time to go to church. Oh man, I forgot to read the Daily Bread today. Well, try and squeeze that in a bit later. I think we really have to look at our relationship and try and fight that tendency. I'm going to tell you a story again of a story I really like. It was a story of a woman in a horrible marriage. Her husband would leave for these to-do lists when he left for work. Ladies, how does that go over? when your husband leaves you a big long to-do list is I want the vacuuming done and I want dinner on the table at 5, no excuses. That's, if anyways, literally this woman, this would happen. This man would make a long list, and if things weren't done, he would fly into a rage. He would fly into a rage, and several so she tyrannically lived under his controlling rule. But one day, her husband died. Several years later, the woman met a wonderful Christian man, and she remarried. And several years into her new marriage, while doing household chores one day, she stumbled across one of these crumpled old lists that her deceased husband would bully her into completing out of fear. And she noticed upon reading the list, she began to note that many of the things on the list she was now doing naturally out of love for her new husband. It wasn't a to-do list anymore. Many of these things she did naturally because of the vibrancy of their relationship, because she wanted to please him, because she wanted to serve him, and her husband as well. Sure would do the same. And as C.S. Lewis shares a wonderful insight into this reality of a healthy relationship, he said, many things, such as loving, sleeping, and behaving unaffectedly, are done worst when we try hardest to do them. They're done worst when we try hardest to do them. God created us to love him. And he created us to shower his love upon us. This is in 1 John, in this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. And John 15 says this, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. 1 John 4:8, whoever does not love God, does not know God, because God is love. These verses all speak of God pouring out his love upon us and then shaping us and hoping and for us to respond in love. Rich Mullins said this, and I really suspect of all the things we think and we want to know, the only thing we really want to know is that we are loved. And if Jesus means anything, he means that you are loved. I hope you know that. And I hope you stop worrying about all the stuff you don't know, because I don't think it amounts to a hill of beans. Let me just sum up what I just want to encourage you to just be challenged with this morning. Let God love you. Let God love you. And then learn to love him back. God has initiated this amazing relationship. He's revealed himself to you in his Son, Jesus. He's revealed himself to you as well through creation. Receive his gift of his Son. Receive his gift of the beautiful world he's given us. Receive his provision. Receive the relationships and your loved ones. Let God love you through all these wonderful things. And then learn to love him back. Learn to love him back. Church, let's not get stuck on a to-do list. Let's allow God to love us and love him back. 1 John, well, actually, just going right back to John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. I want you to personalize that verse. If you haven't, I want you to remind yourself, for God so loved me that he gave his only begotten Son. And then learn to love God back. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and all your mind. There are many, many ways we could talk about what that looks like. And I think that would be another sermon about how we can learn to just love God back. But I think that there are, I was at the fireworks last night and just enjoying the beauty of the fireworks and enjoying they were reflecting off the water. And, just saying, God, thank you. Thank you for loving me. Thank you so much for your gift of the beauty of creation. God, thank you so much for all the blessings you've given up, and I just receive those. Instead of questioning them and saying, Lord, why me? Just receive those things. Lord, ultimately when it comes to his Son, Jesus, none of us can say we earn that. That is a gift of grace. That's the core of the gospel. Just to receive and say, Lord, I don't deserve your Son. That's what grace is, Lord, but I receive it. I receive it. It's unmerited favor. On that basis, I think we can really, on that foundation, we can get away from a to-do list, church. We can get away from the tendency to want to check off boxes just to get things done. And just live in that natural place of just letting that tree, just being what we're created to be. And just enjoying and letting God love us and loving him back. And I think as we partake in communion together, I think this is a wonderful way for us to let God love us. And then to return his love by remembering him, by honoring what he did for us at the cross, by looking forward to his return. Jesus says, until I come again, I want you to practice this in memory of me. We can say, Lord, we look forward to your return. Lord, we know you're coming again. We believe what you promised. Lord, we believe that that you did save us with your own blood. So let's partake in communion together.